Hi, and welcome to Chief for Yourself. We're happy to have you with us wherever you are in the world today. We're dedicated to strengthening the chi, or the essential energy, and to the living of a genuine life. Our guest today has distinguished herself in the academic world, but she's also very much at home in the world of mysticism, in particular in the area of afterlife science. Dr. Julia Assante is an accomplished social historian of the ancient Near East. She's earned her PhD from Columbia University, and she's been a practicing psychic and medium for more than 30 years. Her accuracy in telepathy tested at Columbia, and she's written a book called The Last Frontier, exploring the afterlife and transforming our fear of death. We're happy to welcome Dr. Julia Assante to Chi for Yourself. Julia, thanks again for coming on the program today. Appreciate it.
I have to say I'm happy to be here.
Well, wonderful. I know you were able to communicate with the dead early in life, and I can imagine some pretty interesting dinner table conversations. Talk about your early years and what it was like to come to the realization that you can contact the dead.
Well, let me just make one comment. The dinner table is exactly where a lot of this activity occurs, even in restaurants. So you're right on there. The actual straight conscious after-death communication work really didn't start until I was a professional intuitive. That was in the mid-70s.
Mm-hmm.
And however, before then, I had a lot of mystical experiences as a child and a near-death experience and life reviews, all kinds of things, but also what I call an infinity moments where I was sort of taken up out of my body and understood everything without... actually through nature, not through stress. Usually these things occur through stresses and near-death experiences, but for me it was mostly nature. So I knew that that I was unusual. I was very much of a loner. But when I started working as a professional intuitive, that's when it became standard to have the dead, the deceased, come and deliver messages, often very quick ones. In 1983, however, someone I was close to, she wasn't properly a friend, she was more of a patient friend, died and had great difficulty after she passed over. And she was in denial of death. She was angry that no one had prepared her for dying. Everyone was expecting a miracle and worried about her two children. It was a mess. And that's when I started having quite strong after-death communication that was extended. In her case, in Mary Ellen's case, it went on for 3 days where I was just in and out of trance, checking in on her, talking with her, being with her, until I found, or there was a setup for her to turn finally away from physical focus into non-physical focus. It took some reasoning, took some rationalization, and it took being there with her to get her to accept her condition. Some 20 years later, I went to a psychic, and I don't do that often, but I went to a psychic, and this psychic said, there's a woman named Mary Ellen, a spirit from the other side who's very, very happy and wants to thank you. So it was well done. And from then on, there was just more and more of it until it started to reach a peak with the death of someone named Michael, and then that seemed to open all kinds of portals.
Yeah, that was kind of a milestone moment, wasn't it? Michael's death? That was a very big...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the fullness of the shared death experience, in other words, being able to watch in incredible detail the movement in and out of the energy body, moving in and out of the body, the looking down on the body in surprise, sort of wafting away, and then the resuscitation paddles and the reds that would come out of that and he'd come back in. But more than anything was when we finally did make contact, when I finally let him do that. He was trying to get my attention for days with electronic problems in the house and fax twittering, phone ringing, no one there, and even the door open in the morning, which is a serious problem if you're living in New York City. So I finally let him in. And I think what strikes me most now is not just the euphoria, not just the fact that this was a communication that went on for an hour in high emotion, with joking and dialogue and questions and answers and discussions. Not just that, but what it did for him. That someone could see him, someone could feel him, someone could hear him, perceive him, and share with him what that really hit home. We dismiss the deceased. We imagine that they're unreachable or figments of our imagination. When they try to get our attention, they try to approach us, and this is a tremendous disservice. They want us to know how they are, what the conditions were, their death sometimes, if it was accidental or so-called accidental or unexpected. And more than anything, they want us to know who they are now without all the fear and all of the distortions that come with physicalized life.
That's interesting, because a lot of us who have a Sunday school reference to death think that once you pass over, that's it, you're in dreamland and it's wonderful. But you're saying that there are issues among the dead and things that need to be hashed out with the living.
That's right. And especially, we're very misguided about death and what it means, and we have very old-fashioned ideas about the afterlife. And truthfully, we're just beginning to look at it. We're just beginning to understand the diversity of experience directly after death. I would say the majority of people in the modern West pass over and become almost instantly liberated, instantly euphoric, feeling new skills, new mobilities, being able to move by intention alone. There's so much magic going on that usually they're just stunned. But that's not always true. And in fact, people can go over in such a state of denial or misdirection or with false expectations that there's anger, or they get locked in delusions of their own making, or they get suspended in a kind of nothingness, like Mary Ellen. She could not move back to our realm, and she couldn't move forward. She was stuck. No creativity happened there. So if we knew more about the afterlife, if we prepared differently for it, if we understood death as the miracle it is, the wonder that it is, the creative act that it is, all of this would not happen. Reconciliation would be achieved either on the deathbed, before death, or even afterwards in what I call a living relationship. That was a mouthful.
That was excellent. I mean, there's just so much room for exploration, and it just blows you away, because you think that the finality you've always heard anyway, that it's just so final, and now it's wide open. I mean, anything could happen, anything can be learned, especially, and I like that. I think back to conversations I've had on the topic of death or what happens when we die, and it seems to me just about everyone has at least some fear of death. Have you found it's punishment we're afraid of, or just not existing anymore, or what have you found?
Oh, this is a huge story. We have the fear of death is inculcated by religions, whether it's reincarnational systems. If you don't do well in this life, morally not up to snuff, your next life is going to be more difficult. So there's that kind of thing even with reincarnation. Certainly other kinds of systems have a heaven and hell, reward punishment model, and none of these things really apply. However, it isn't just the fault of religion. Government does it. War industries do it. They push the fear of death. It's exploited. Medicine exploits the fear of death. Pharmaceuticals, insurance companies, even the way we teach history promotes the fear of death. Health and beauty industry, that's huge. But news and entertainment, you think about what you hear every day, the gruesome deaths, the catastrophes, and if you think about what you're watching at night, these stories around the worst possible types of death, the most gory, you'll see that we are, in fact, obsessed with death. On the other hand, actual dying we don't talk about. We don't talk about it to the dying. We don't talk about it to children. We don't talk about it with each other. The topic of real death is a taboo. Spectacularized death, we're obsessed with it. It's schizophrenic. So really, the fear of death has us captive. There's no question about it. And it is causing sickness. It is causing difficulty in dying. It's making dying into a pathology, a failure, an enemy.
Yeah.
And that makes it impossible for anyone around the dying and the dying themselves to appreciate the magic and the creativity of that transition.
Yeah, and in a capitalistic society, it doesn't bode well because fear of death is just good business.
Yep,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is.
yeah,
And it's even built into our economics.
yeah.
Constant growth policy. And it's really this inability to grasp the nature of immortality is causing huge problems with greed and devastation of the planet and overpopulation. And if we really had even the smallest understanding of the real nature of immortality, including incarnations, we would not need any of this anymore.
Mm-hmm. In your experience, are there many God references by those who are near death?
God references?
Yeah. Seeing God, having an experience of
No.
prophets or God or heaven?
No. Isn't that strange? It's mostly what we do know. The dying mostly talk about the families. And the people who come for the dying from the other side are almost always relatives, close family members or wife or spouse or whatever. There isn't anything about a God, or there are references in your death experiences to people who believe they've seen Jesus, or that they meet the being of light and think of that, the being of light as God. It's a matter of interpretation. But there is a sense of a divine element, a divine atmosphere that takes hold almost immediately before death and continues afterwards if a person is reconciled and isn't afraid or in denial where he or she is going. And that is what I call the presence. It's a kind of a knowing, loving luminosity. And I have seen people die right into it, into a golden light, just melt right into it. And I've experienced that. People experience that while still in body. And it is an extraordinary experience. For me, once it lasted for several months. I was really away from the human drama, the self-imposed human drama. I saw everything differently. And I felt total security, totally uplifted, totally loved and known. And that's really the primary and deepest experience that people have on the other side when they are not locked up in some kind of psychological problem.
So if we remove the dogma from these references and just make do with some sort of force or higher power or whatever you want to say, would that suffice?
Right. I mean, in the Abrahamic religions, the Judaic tradition we've inherited as Christians or Muslims or even modern Jews, God was not, the God of the Old Testament was not present in the afterlife. And this is a very complicated story, and certainly we don't have time for it, but that was not the expectation. It was more a model of the Greek ideas, contemporary Greek ideas of God being in Olympus, and the dead people are someplace else.
Well, moving down the pecking order then, do we have protectors looking over us, angels or patron saints, for instance?
All the time. There's lots of different kinds of beings out there. There are certainly angels. They do a number of different things. I've never seen any with wings. They seem very solemn to me. We have relatives. We have incarnational relationships that come before. We also have our own future selves or parts of ourselves that are operating in different dimensions who help us. So, yes, it's always there. And your oversoul itself, if you can learn to contact that, that's your greatest source of power.
Now, a hardcore skeptic might say, well, I've never been aware of having any contact with dead friends or relatives, but in the book you point out some subtle signs that we are making contact. Talk about those contacts that may not appear to be contacts.
The most common would be what I call mental intrusions, and this is something that I really believe everyone has had. And by the way, John, this estimated 72%, 50 to 72% of the American population has had a direct spontaneous encounter. And this is not including children, not including people on the deathbed, which is really common, not including mediumship, not including dreams, and not including therapies that induce after-death communication. So when you're looking at all of that sector that's been left out, it may be that we're getting about 100%, because many times it's not recognized or not admitted because of fear of ridicule.
Yeah.
So given that, the signs, I talked extensively about subtle signs. As I said, mental intrusions are probably the most common and the most easy to miss. It's when your thoughts change abruptly or you get a sudden inspiration. For me, it comes very often in a mental intrusion comes very often in a song. I know that song is attached to someone, and I know who that person is. And sometimes it can be a song that you're humming in your head and realize the lyrics are a message. There's all other kinds. There's voice phenomena, smells, a disturbance in space, something you catch in the corner of your eye, and then even stronger ones. A picture of your beloved departed may fall off the wall or start glowing, or your dead father might start your car up when it's parked and locked. It can get really, really strong. If they can't get your attention and they really want to, they'll do a lot. And they can even raise tables. But for the most part, the signs are subtle, and in the book I give step-by-step procedures of how to work with a subtle sign. Even a grief wave is a sign very often that the presence of the person whom you're grieving, and you associate it with sadness and go into grief. How to work with these kinds of signs in order to coax them into two-way communication.
You mentioned, you referenced the dead father, and it reminded me of my own father who passed away many years ago. I've had many strong intuitive feelings that my father is somehow working out some sort of issues that he had possibly in life, or he's just come to the realization. But it's a very intuitive issue. I've never had any appearance or any other sign like that. But the intuition is so strong, and I trust it so much. Is intuition included in these subtle symbols, or not so subtle?
Yeah, absolutely. Intuition, most of it is a product of telepathy. My view of telepathy is a little bit more expanded than most people's, but it's easy. If I were with you right now, I would just train you a little bit, take me about 5 minutes, what to do when you feel that intuition coming, or you intuit your father's presence. And just briefly, the first thing is to look for mental images. Don't look outside of yourself, look inside of yourself, and formulate a picture of, say, in your case, your father in your mind, and then speak to him. And that usually will initiate the dialogue. And it's a little bit more extensive than what I just said, but that's the principle.
Yeah, it can be.
And speak always from your strongest emotion. Whether it's anger, grief, or whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Going inside is always a safe bet, isn't it? I mean, it's a place to go for answers, for whatever. Yeah. We of course love our animals and our pets, and we might even think of them as spirits. They have certain senses that are a lot more powerful than our own. Do animals have this kind of contact with the deceased?
Oh, yes. They certainly do. And with Mary Ellen, this woman I've told you about in the beginning of the session, our dog Cosmo was the first one to notice her after death, and he was barking like crazy at the ceiling, by the way. And in the reverse situation, our pets who are over there on the other side, often with relatives of ours or friends of ours who may not even have known the pet, there's a very high percentage of pets returning to their owners, people feeling them jump on the bed or even being licked on the face. I just talked to some guy 2 days ago who had very extensive accounts of his dog Pitchland and how this dog is maintaining contact with him. So I think it's something in the area of 10 to 16% of all spontaneous encounters, not looked for induced encounters, occur with pets. And yes, they are there very often when you pass over, rushing to you. And the mechanisms they have of the psyche are the same as ours. And you can have extensive communication with them.
It's interesting that there are figures, percentages, and such, and of course you've been tested and did very well with that. Talk about how you were tested and what you found and what you had to go through to get to those numbers.
First of all, I'm a good tester. I perform well in test situations, so in some respects it's a little unfair what happened. There were psychics he worked professional psychics as one side, and then people with no psychic experience on the other. And people with no psychic experience and psychics were separated. And we were to read what that person was experiencing in another building. This is really remote viewing and telepathy put together. And we read what they were looking at was stimuli they were exposed to, all this kind of stuff. And for me, I couldn't stop talking. The machines, the biofeedback machines that they used on me were useless. And I was reaching such subconscious levels of information that I couldn't get it all in until the next stimulus, between the time I caught a thought or a reaction to a stimulus and the next time that person was exposed to a stimulus. Then we reversed it so that the non-psychic person was attempting to do the same thing with the psychic person. And for me, I was tested against the rest of the professional psychics, and I was in my own category.
Mm. Wow.
It was exciting material. The researchers used me later for Men's Society ghost busting, which is what we all called it back then.
Mm-hmm.
I call it ghost liberating, and that also led to even more exciting events and strange things on photographs and group paralysis and all kinds of yummy stuff. It's a lot of fun, really. As long as you realize it's a benign universe.
Some folks are going to have to warm up.
And the only thing that's going to hurt you is your own fear.
Yeah, that back to the Roosevelt thing, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Exactly.
The more we learn, the more we break down the barriers and the ignorance. Going back to the God thing, the God question, does an atheist have less baggage in the dying process, or what have you found there?
I found that there's an awful lot of different kinds of atheists. If there's an angry atheist, especially one who's been pushed into religion in childhood, there might be a lot of denial and a lot of stuckedness directly after death. I know some atheists, on the other hand, who have no belief in the afterlife whatsoever, but still talk to their dead relatives and children in one case. These are happy people. They are enjoying their lives to the fullest, and I'm sure they will be surprised and thrilled when they pass over to find out that they're still alive. So there's all different degrees of it. It can cause denial, it can cause problems, and then on the other hand, it depends on the psychological climate that you are in at death, your own psychological makeup, whether you're resilient or not, whether this is about anger or blockage or not, what happens. It's also cultural. What happens afterwards is strongly influenced by cultural factors and social conditioning, and we also use pieces of the lives we just exited to recreate situations in the afterlife. So that what I talk about is modern Western, but if I were talking about a Neanderthal's afterlife experience, it would just dialogue that we're having now would be entirely different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To push yet another hot button, and I love this one because I've been in knee-deep in arguments over this point, but you say the fear of death has been boosted by the invention of what we understand as sin. Talk about sin as an invention. I know you'll do a better job than I do, but well, how is sin an invention?
In earlier systems, say in Mesopotamia, which had an afterlife we call the netherworld. This is an afterlife where everyone goes. Their morality did not play a role. In fact, there was no sense of sin, not even a word for it in Mesopotamia in cuneiform, and this is very much earlier than the Bible. So we're talking about a kind of afterlife that is modeled more along the lines of traditional societies, in that they're not afterlives that are produced by institutions, and there's a huge difference. They come out of traditions, they come out of tribal. American Indians, for instance, have afterlife that's similar to the life they have now. It's just more beautiful, and you just slip into it. Similar in Mesopotamia as well. Sin did not play a role. By the way, sin didn't play a role either in the story of Noah and the Ark, which is 2,000 years older than the one we have in the Bible, and comes from cuneiform. So what we're looking at is a gradual exclusivism in the afterlife, where people who are morally righteous in Middle Kingdom in Egypt, around 1500 BC, the morality of your soul was weighed against a feather. There have always been conditions for afterlife entrance anyway in Egypt. It's not like the traditional ones of Mesopotamia where everyone goes. In Egypt, you had to be trained. You had to have certain rituals and rites memorized, known, and perfectly performed. You went through pearls. It was difficult. It wasn't just an easy entry. Mm-hmm. And then you move to Judaism around when Judaism was forming. And if I give you the dates that most scholars believe in, I think I will cause too much problems with your audience. Then you really get the notion of sinning against a specific god. That eating pork is a sin against. This is not really a moral issue. These are tribal ideas, tribal laws that were codified to a specific cult and a specific godhood. Where earlier there was not sin, but you could really get a god angry or a goddess angry if you didn't do the right honors, didn't perform the right honors. Mm-hmm. So there's a huge shift going on, say, around the 5th, 6th century BC. This concept of sin, which is probably the most devastating thing that has happened to our planet.
Yeah. On a personal note, years ago, one of my relatives was very sick and dying, but she was able to extend the process over a pretty long period of time. Seems she had a bit of some family business to tend to before leaving. Are the dying able to sort of buy more time before they leave us?
Absolutely. They buy time, or in very rare cases, they'll shorten it, depending on the circumstances. They really do have a lot of this in control. And sometimes they will be able to tell you the exact moment of their death. Well, I've had dead people tell me the exact moment of an animal's death, one of my pets. Oh. These things are known. I mean, there is no time, so future information is present with us now. It's just a matter of retrieval. So yes, it's everything done. There's a tremendous orchestration of the psyche of the dying, where they orchestrate people and situations, circumstances in order to achieve certain goals. Sometimes those goals are not so positive, but most of the time they are driving towards full reconciliation.
One final question.
It's incredible to watch it.
Yeah, I would think so. One last question, I'll let you go. Early in The Last Frontier, you say the world is ready to take the next step in normalizing relations with the dead. What tells you the world is in that ready mode?
We wouldn't be having this conversation 10 years ago. Number one. And the interest in it now is swelling. It has a lot to do with near-death experiences, studies. But, you know, I teach people after-death communication. Everyone so far gets it. People are prepared for it. But even more, we have the invention of the telephone, which introduced us to the idea of talking to a disembodied voice at a distance. And just think how much further we've gone since then. Mm-hmm. The internet works like an interdimensional network. You can instantly access anywhere, anytime, and communicate. So all of these things are developing us for interdimensional and extra-dimensional communication. And it's just a matter of time before the technology, which actually has been achieved, technology for these kinds of communication is really, truly developed in a way where it's reliable. And I'm not talking necessarily about just technology, also individual mediumship. We are all mediums. This kind of ability is hardwired in all of us. It is primarily a telepathic process. That is not a problem. No one is alive without the use of telepathy on a daily basis. It can't happen. You'll get hit by a truck right away.
And people are learning how to bring this out, as you say, so
yes.
It's almost like viral, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That's perfect. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. The book is The Last Frontier, Exploring the Afterlife and Transforming Our Fear of Death. Where can we buy the book?
Well, it's available on the internet booksellers in most or all bookstores, local ones. Q, but also the bigger ones like Barnes and Noble, and you can get them, order them directly from the publishing house, in World Library. So there's it's fully available and in all e-forms.
Okay.
Kindle, yeah.
Yeah. And your website?
Excuse me?
Your website, where are you on the web?
www.juliaassante.com.
All right, easy enough to remember. What does the here and now hold for you? More workshops, possibly another book?
Yes, oh yes. I've got two, actually two, and one small one in the works.
All right. Well, Julia, thanks so much for being with us today. I'm going to keep a watch on your work, and I hope you'll come back and talk with us again. I'd really appreciate that.
I would love to. It's been a great pleasure.
Great. Thanks very much. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Julia Assante. I'll have a link with Julia's website, and of course you'll be able to listen to the show when you visit chiefforyourself.com or go to the GeoHost page on YouTube. These interviews are available, well, they're available there in real time, and then they're archived on YouTube, so you have choices. With the holidays coming up in the U.S., no set guest plan for the next few weeks, but to start off our 2013, I've booked Morgana Ray to be on the show. Morgana has been called the Money Magnet Queen by her fans, and she's a top relationship with money coach. She's the author of Financial Alchemy, 12 Months of Magic and Manifestation, and she asks the question, does money love you? So invest some time in that question, and for now we'll stop right here. Be well, and I'll talk to you soon.